Got time for a couple more while I'm here today. So many people out there are picking up on the bravery and hitting the public eye and sharing. It's pretty good. All right, it's going to be interesting to handful of people. Titled An Evening with Renee Hinden. Hello, Steve. Mine is a story I've been wanting to share for years, but I've never really met anyone who would appreciate what I consider a real special experience. In my youth, on the East Coast, I spent a lot of time in the woods hunting and fishing. My father gave me a single-shot .22 when I was 10 years old, and the next year he presented me with a 20-gauge single shotgun. He also taught me how to use and respect firearms at this early age. Things were different from what they are now. I spent many great times with my father in hunting and fishing camps with him and my uncles, who were all avid hunters and fishermen, so I've always had a connection with the outdoors. In the early to mid-'80s, I lived in Burnaby, BC near Port Moody. I was in my early 30s and would hike and bike to keep in shape and also do a bit of weight training, not to bulk up, but to keep in good health and good shape. For that reason, I joined the World Gym in Port Moody. It was close to home and had all the tools necessary for a good workout. The owner of that gym, John, would become a good friend, and it turned out he was an avid outdoors person, and we had many discussions around wilderness and wilderness experiences. Now, John at the time was a well-known bodybuilding trainer and had actually trained some who became Mr. Olympia, which is considered the peak of bodybuilding trophies. John was considered an expert on muscle development and movement and muscle interaction. On one of my regular visits to the gym, John motioned me into his office. He then told me that one of the world's foremost Sasquatch investigators, Renee Hinden, asked him if he would be interested in doing a critique of the original Patterson tapes from Bluff Creek. When Patterson passed away, Renee Hinden became the custodian of that original tape. John was invited to do so as a specialist in muscle development and how muscle interacts with movement. John asked me if I'd like to come along. Of course I would. At the time, Renee Hinden was the caretaker of a gun club in Richmond, BC, and it was a type of a clubhouse where we met that night. There were 10 of us altogether at that meeting. There was John and I, Renee, and a few of the people who would assist him with his investigations, and 2 Russian scientists. Although it was explained to the group that North American scientists consider Sasquatch as being hokey and didn't take it serious, the Russian scientists took it very serious. John did a great job critiquing the film. We watched it over and over, and I was thrilled to be in the same room as that original film footage that Patterson took at Bluff Creek. We could actually see how the muscles in the legs and the arms and back of the being flexed and responded to movement. It was a female, and you could see the breast move in a way that was natural and could not be imitated in any kind of hoax. We also had a foot castings from Bluff Creek to hold a study. We also had 2 foot castings from Bluff Creek to hold and study. Now we're observing the whole of the footage taken at Bluff Creek by Patterson. Here comes the token helicopter. Directly overhead, of course. Can't be off to the side out of hearing range. Now we're observing the whole of the footage taken at Bluff Creek by Patterson. You mentioned on a past podcast that the creature was at first stooped down on a sandbar near the creek, as if it were maybe fishing. That sort of sparked a memory with me, but I can't be 100% positive, as it was a long time ago. What I do remember without question is the fact that there was more to that videotape than I have personally ever seen on TV. The scene most well known is the Sasquatch walking across the sandbar/creek and turning towards the camera. What is not so well known is the fact that the creature moved on and disappeared into the forest. Now, once into the cover of the woods, the creature turned to its left and about 30 or 40 yards in that direction. The creature turned to its left, and about 30 or 40 yards in that direction, there is footage showing that Sasquatch watching Patterson from the cover of trees. You could see just its head peering out from the woods. Very unnerving, actually. Renee Hinden made a statement that night that he had proved every Sasquatch sighting he investigated as being a hoax, but he could not disprove the Patterson sighting. John's summary was that the muscles and the breasts of that creature moved in a very natural way that could be hard to be created in any kind of a hoax. It was a very memorable evening for me. To top it off, Hinden and his associates were planning a 2-week excursion to Bluff Creek to do some follow-up investigating and invited me to accompany them. However, work schedule and life didn't allow for me to do that. Anyway, I've been wanting to tell that story for a long time, but didn't want to take the risk of being labeled as a nutcase. I feel safe sharing it with you and your audience if you so decide. Just as a side note, I have a bit of history in Pemberton. In the mid-90s, as a construction worker, I worked building a townhouse development on the left near the railroad tracks just as you enter Pemberton. Yours truly, Paul Josie. Well, that's an interesting one, Paul. Thanks for coming forward with that share. And, yeah. I've had people who I trust with my life tell me flat out that they saw the footage of that Sasquatch digging in the sand and there being a blood in the sand and the evidence of it being shot and killed amongst a few other ones. But I guess the most important part of that would be that possibly you confirmed that there's a lot more to that videotape than has been shared with the public. Why? I haven't a clue. Was there a team brought in there to kill a bunch of these things because of that road construction? Probably. I'm swinging to probably. But the friend of mine who looked me square in the eye and told me flat out they saw all of the original footage, I believed them. Why would they lie? It doesn't even make sense for them to lie to me. It just doesn't make sense. So what I learn and I feel 100% confident with, I share with all you guys. All right? If that information offends any of you, well, get your head out of your ass and quit being a member of offended culture. It's not going to get you anywhere, and you're not going to learn shit unless you open up your ears and listen to all sources coming from all angles, figure out that missing piece to your puzzle on your own, and put it all together. Take from it what you will or not, all right? But do not attempt to silence another human being, ever. All that does is show guilt and show that you're a little deranged between the ears. All right? But again, thanks for sending that message. And just so you guys know, I have another email in here I read the other day. I'm going to have to try to find it. Of a man who was told specifically by the government in the United States, if you can safely dispatch them, do it. Go figure. Why would they want to do that? Okay? And I'll probably find that email. And I'll share it with you eventually, but I read it just the other day, and of course I'm in 2 different folders right now. There's so many things. There's so many emails. Here's another one. 3 things recently. I've sent you another email with conversation with friends. What if I don't show up after a hike? Quote. Now I have 3 separate events to share. In 2000, a friend had a house fire, so wife and son and I went to Oregon, U.S. to rebuild for him. We stayed in a refurbished barn. The front faced south, full glass to the floor, and deck was full 5 feet off the ground. 3 of us were sitting, watching a movie on TV, when a Bigfoot walked by the window. The floor was 5 feet off the ground. TV was 3 feet off the floor. The head and shoulders about 3 feet above the TV. It turned its head and looked at us walking by. Long black hair, but eyes and cheeks below and forehead were clear. Hair above the mouth was just a thick mustache. It just walked like out for a stroll. We sat there 10 minutes in silence. I asked, got head nods, then we watched the rest of the movie. What? Second one I'll share. Years later, across the country in North Carolina, I was asleep in my recliner and got this feeling. Couldn't say what, just a little shock to the body, like when that big elk you're tracking comes over the rise in front of you, too close for the shot. I opened my eyes. Looking through the window were the most amazing blue eyes I have ever seen. His face was almost clear of hair, looked groomed, even looked like the old school bikers that brush their beards and trim the stash. No fear or anxiety, just shock and the connection between us, literally eye to eye. I laid reclined as he stood there, never heard a thing, vocal or mentally, just a calm presence and a strange connection. I had to close my eyes. I hadn't taken a breath, and I lost track of. I opened them, and he was gone. I blinked, sucked air, and still nothing. Crazy thing, I had 2 great guard dogs, playful and cautious. Looked out the front window, and they were both sound asleep on the porch, never even stirred. Went out and put my 9-foot ladder on the 15-inch footprints. With me about 18 to 24 inches above the ladder, I could see my son's head laying on the recliner. Last, I like walking the river trail on my lunch. I was just going along and had turned to return to the place where I entered the trail when something caught my attention. A reflection on the motorcycle mirror in the corner of my glasses. I've habitually put them in at least one side since my old riding days. I don't like people walking up behind me and great when outdoors where elk, bear, and other things are. I saw clearly an outline of human shape. It was in a silver jumpsuit. I moved aside and turned, thinking a sexy jogger was going past me. I'm older, but far from blind, and if wearing that silver outfit, I figured she'd be a looker. Problem. I moved over and turned around to see nothing. It was there. Silver outfit moving until I turned. Nothing was there. I stood in confusion for a few seconds, then started scanning around the trail, back up it, and out on the little cutout. I couldn't say exactly what it is that I saw. It seemed similar to it many times through the years. There was a glimmer, shimmering outline about 30 yards away. It caught my eye when it moved partially into the sunlight. It was human-shaped, but I can't say more than that. It stopped dead still the minute I locked onto it. Then moved terribly fast into the full sunlight, and I lost it. Two others I hadn't even noticed went out into the sunlight behind the first. That's what really intimidates. They were both closer to me, one within 10 feet. At the speed they moved, even if you saw the outline, you'd not have a chance. What? I couldn't even hazard a guess. We know Bigfoot. They're our older brothers, by the way, if we were talking to each other. We know the shadow people. Not good seeing them about. These are neither, and I felt complete indifference from them other than I spotted one. Mahe Ona. Just Raven, if you read this. Peace and favor to all yours. Wow. That's an interesting email. Thanks for sharing that. I couldn't imagine sitting there watching TV with a few friends and one of these things walking by, casually glancing in the window at us, keeps going, and everybody sort of looks at each other and keep watching TV. Wow. That's something else, man. Something else. Hi, Steve. I live in the Olympic Peninsula, area of Washington State, and live next to a creek. My home sits atop a hill overlooking the creek about 100 yards from it. I've known about the Sasquatch beings for going on 3 years now. I've seen a huge male Sasquatch looking in my window, and I've seen 2 young ones. One was right outside my window. The other was down at the creek side. I've been screamed at, growled at twice, zapped once, and yelled at. I love my home, and I'm not moving anytime soon. So I have talked to the Sasquatch beings to tell them I mean them no harm, and to live and let live. My story is true, and I've screamed back at them twice. I was outside early one morning letting the chickens out of their coop and just about to walk out of the run when my tiny banty rooster, Hoot, came up behind me with the spurs and a flurry of wings against my leg. This has been going on long enough, so I turned around, shut the gate, and yelled at the rooster, "You want a piece of me?" A few other words that are not fits for some ears, mind you. I was not going to hurt him, but let him know attacking me wasn't a good idea. By the time I made it to the end of the 12-foot run, the Sasquatch down at the creek side started screaming at me. It sounded like a female and a child screaming, but much louder in volume, and the blend of woman and cougars at once. Well, I was pretty upset and stopped chasing my rooster, stood up with my hands to my hips while yelling back at the screaming forest people. I yelled, "You know I wasn't going to hurt him, and that you know what a little bastard he is." The woods went silent. I had the impression they told me not to hurt him. This is why I yelled back at them. I stood there thinking about yelling at the Sasquatch beings and decided to leave towards the house. There was no more screaming. The second time I yelled back at them was while I was weed eating early one morning. I was outside in the yard alone working the weed eater when all of a sudden I was zapped. It was similar to touching a hot wire fence that is used by some horse owners. I don't have such a fence. I shut off my weed eater and yelled at the Sasquatch, "Why the hell did you do that?" I took it as they didn't like the noise I was making so early, so I stopped my work and went inside. I'm not sure if I'm brave or have no sense. I wasn't hurt or charged. I love my home and area I live, so the Sasquatch and I have to get along. I've seen 3 close up, but that's for another day. Feel free to share my nickname, Lenny, as my name is known with my career. If you want to hear other Sasquatch encounters with the Sasquatch beings, let me know. Yeah, I'm pretty sure everybody wants to hear more, for sure. Especially if you're living side by side with them, getting along. I think the knowledge you have accumulated just from doing that's probably going to be pretty handy to a lot of people here, right? So, yeah, if you get a chance, definitely email back and share as much as you can or you wish to. because it's going to help somebody out here. Let's face it, it's helping so many people. And so, yeah, we really appreciate. So, on that note, thanks again for sending your email in to all of us. And that's all for now from me until you see me on a pristine West Coast river with a fishing rod in my hands.